Good evening. Welcome back to the Weekly Word. Thanks for joining us again this week. We're at another one of those places where there's just layers and layers of history. And you know the difference in history and prehistoric stuff. It's not history until we got far enough down the timeline until somebody could come along and write down things that we can read today. Every place has really got layers and layers of history. The very place where you're at right now, you know, who was doing something there long before you, and if the world goes on, who will still be doing something there in that spot after you're gone. But we're at the historic Starr Mountain Fire Tower. And the history we're going to talk about here goes way back even before the fire tower. We'll bring it down, wind it up there in a minute. But if you go back far enough in history, back before there was a United States of America, when we were still colonies and under the rule of King George, King George's law said that no whites could settle beyond the western boundary of the Appalachian Mountains. And this right down through here is just about as far west as you could get. In fact, today what we use for the Starr Mountain Horse Trail would have been right on the western boundary of the United States of America. Anything beyond this over here would have been considered Indian territory and have been off limits for the whites to stay there, to settle there. Looking across the Tennessee Valley to the Cumberland Plateau, and they didn't even know how far it would have been on to the Pacific Ocean at that time. But we come on down through history. It was also a special place right here in this spot to the Cherokee at one time. Not necessarily a sacred place, but a place of special purpose. The capital of the Cherokee Nation, Chota, was kind of like our Washington, D.C. It was where the major decisions were made at, and it was several miles on up to I guess it would be the north and east on the banks of the Little Tennessee River. You can still visit that. Maybe we'll do a weekly word up there sometime. And they would make their decisions up there. But by later on in the Cherokee Nation, Dragon Canoe and his warriors had gotten mad, and they was warlike, and they had left the rest of them. They moved down here to Chattanooga, where they started what become known as the tribe of the Chickamaugas. But they were still connected with the rest of the nation, and when decisions were being made up there at Chota, they wanted to know what the answer was in a lot of them. So from Chota, they would send up smoke signals. I don't know if they did it by colored smoke or what if it was a yes or a no, or what the decision was at the time. But that was too far to see from Signal Mountain, where they had watchmen set up. So they had to have a relay station. So they brought other Cherokees down here to this high dome on Starr Mountain that was in between, and they would see the smoke at Chota, and then they would relay the message for those watchers down there on the Signal Mountain, so the Chickamaugas could know what the decision was made also. That was a pretty neat and ingenious thing, if you would. Having to do with smoke, and also in this same area, though, what you're looking at is the old fire tower that in more recent years, in the last century, it's not in use anymore. But we used to have fire towers all over these mountains. All of our high knobs had them on them. Now I'll start to mention some of them, and I'll probably leave one or two out, and you can reply to me and show me the ones that I left out. But just off the top of my head, if we go up to Cityco near Far Gap, there was a fire tower there at Coal Springs Knob. And then you come over to the Cherokee Skyway today, and there was one on Hemlock Knob. And this is just the Tennessee side. We won't even talk about the one that was over near the Hangover, but you come on over the Tennessee side. We had one on Beaver Dam Bald. We had one on Waucheesy Bald. We had one on Buck Bald. There was one here on Starr Mountain. This one was last manned by the state. I think the state may still own this one. The rest of them are all gone as far as I know. There was one right down here on Oswald Dome just south of the Hiwassee River. It's still in existence, and they just took it down here in the last couple of decades or so. I remember when they disassembled it, and I can tell you where it's at. They moved the one from Oswald Dome down to the Whitewater Center on the Ocoee River. And if you don't mind paying a $3 parking fee, you can go down there and look at it and actually go up in it and see what it was like. It's a tourist trap today. There was one there. There was one on Sassafras Knob. There was one on on top of Big Frog Mountain, and I've probably missed some, but that's just in the south zone of the Cherokee. The demise of them was the airplane. Eventually the airplane became more efficient, and today they use a helicopter. They just launch it every few hours or every day or so in the fire season, and just in a few minutes they'll cover the entire forest and look for smoke. But back in that day, you had to have a man in each one of these fire towers during the fire season, and they would constantly look out on the panoramic views, and if they saw a little smoke somewhere, they had an item in there. It had a regular name I can't think of now, but it's basically a transit, and they'd turn that transit and they'd line it right up directly where they saw that smoke, and then they'd draw that line across the map going all the way through it. You knew exactly the line it was on, but you didn't know how far it was. But they'd communicate with somebody in one of the other towers, and they would see the smoke too, and they'd do the same thing with their transit, and where they crossed at was exactly where the fire was. It's called triangulation. It's rather ingenious. But these guys back then, they were the watchmen, the men in the fire tower. And that's sort of like today, our preachers are our watchmen. You know, you need to listen to your preachers. They're doing the best they can to watch out for danger and get the message and relay it to the people. So there's some better than others, and some of them are just shysters, I know, but most of them, I think, are good-hearted people who are trying to get the message and warn the people to them. So pray for your preachers. Don't complain about them. Pray for them. We'll see you next week on the Weekly Word.